My neighbor reported me for feeding stray cats, and now they all live in my garage. Honestly, it sounds like the kind of headline you'd scroll past thinking it belongs to a local newspaper's quirky crime section. But it's my actual Tuesday afternoon self-destruct sequence. My name's Nora Del Campo, 32, graphic designer, serial feeder of all things whiskered, and current unwilling zookeeper of 12 cats and one extremely judgmental neighbor. It started simply enough, or at least as simply as any story involving a one-eyed tabby named Biscuit ever can. Last winter, a thin gray stray began haunting our cul-de-sac, crying under car engines and stealing leftover chicken bones from trash bins. Everyone ignored it except me. Something about that shaky meow sounded like unopened mail, impossible to forget once you've heard it. So I started leaving food behind the hedge. That was supposed to be the end of it. Instead, I became, apparently, the feline messiah of Wisteria Lane. Word spreads fast in cat society. Within a week, there were 3. Biscuit, a black fluff ball with half a tail I christened Mochi, and a calico mother I dubbed Praline. They'd materialize each evening when I came home from work, watching me with that polite suspicion, typical of creatures both wild and opportunistic. I enjoyed the routine. Fill bowls, step back. Watch tiny civilizations negotiate dinner etiquette. My landlord, Mrs. Alvarez, didn't mind. She even donated an old blanket for them. The only person seething through Venetian blinds was Clive Harrison, age 60, retired banker, possessor of a lawn so manicured it probably required tweezers. He first approached me mid-March, gripping a rake like a weapon. "Those cats scratch my car," he declared, "and they breed." I glanced at the trio, currently licking kibble like churchgoers at communion. "They mostly eat and nap," I said gently. "No orgies reported so far." His face stayed stone. Humor had apparently been repossessed along with the rest of his joie de vivre. A few mornings later, a bright yellow citation fluttered on my mailbox. Unauthorized feeding of stray animals. Our homeowners association, apparently run by small deities with too much time, had rules about attracting wildlife. I was officially a criminal. I pictured the mugshot. Tired woman clutching meow mix. Furious and indignant, I vented online, half joking. The post went viral in our local community page. Comments poured in ranging from "thank you for caring" to "feral cat colonies destroy ecosystems." One woman offered to bring traps and start a TNR, Trap Neuter Release operation. That's how chaos achieved new altitude. By April, there were not 3, but 8 cats, the offspring of Praline, all wobbling legs and chaotic cuteness. My tiny porch had turned into a daycare center. I built a cardboard shelter, insulated with old t-shirts, installed a covered litter corner, and kept promising myself it was temporary. Still, I knew Clive was plotting. His curtains twitched every time I stepped outside. Eventually, predictably, he escalated. The call came one Friday afternoon while I was knee-deep in deadlines. "This is animal control. We've received reports of over 10 strays being fed at address." The voice was polite but firm. My stomach did acrobatics. That evening, 2 officers knocked on my door, accompanied by Clive, smiling the way hunters do when bounty season opens. I half expected handcuffs. Instead, something surreal happened. As I explained that I was arranging for the TNR volunteers next week, one of the officers, a tall woman with cat hair on her own sleeve, nodded sympathetically. "If she's organizing spay and release, she's doing you all a favor," she told Clive. "Otherwise, you'd have 50 cats by Christmas." His jaw clenched. I nearly applauded. They gave me an official pamphlet about colony management and left with friendly waves. Clive stomped back to his palace of clipped hedges. For 2 days, peace reigned. Then the storm hit, literally and figuratively. A spring thunderstorm rolled across town, sheets of rain hammering the roofs. Around midnight, I heard desperate yowls outside. The cardboard shelters were no match for a monsoon, and my conscience refused to lie in bed listening. So I opened my garage door, shivering cats racing past my ankles like small furry torpedoes. 12 of them, soaked, trembling, smelling faintly of tragedy. I laid towels, turned on a space heater, and whispered soothing nonsense. When the thunder eased, every cat had curled somewhere: tool shelf, laundry basket, bicycle seat. I stared at the scene, realizing I had just unofficially adopted a zoo. The next morning, sunlight touched an apocalyptic garage: fur tumbleweeds, muddy paw prints, and a soundtrack of purring gratitude. I texted my friend Leia, local vet technician and cat saint. "What do I do now?" She replied, "Name them." So I did. Hazel, Domino, Pepper, Pip, Coco, Juniper, Dollop, and Fig joined the ranks. Naming them made the situation absurdly official. By afternoon, Clive appeared again, phone in hand, grumbling about biohazards. I met him halfway on the driveway, covered in cat hair and moral conviction. "They'll stay here until the shelters resume intake," I said, before he could speak. "And half are already scheduled for surgery Wednesday. If you want to complain, call the storm." For once, he had no reply. Perhaps compassion isn't in his vocabulary's quick access menu. For the next weeks, my life rearranged itself around feline schedules: dawn feeding, litter duty, vet trips. My garage smelled vaguely of fish and laundry detergent. Yet every new purr turned anxiety into calm. The cats learned patterns: when I'd return home, where snacks came from, which shelf was sacred. Even Biscuit, the old patriarch, claimed the seat of my unused treadmill as throne. And every night, closing the door, I'd mutter, "Temporary, absolutely temporary," knowing full well I was lying. One morning, sipping coffee by the doorway, I caught sight of Clive crouching near his rose bushes. For a second, I feared another report, but instead, he reached into the hedge and gently lifted a small white kitten, the last of Praline's brood I'd been searching for all week. He glanced up, embarrassed, and muttered, "Thrown this under my grill." I took the kitten, thanked him sincerely, and noticed something close to guilt flicker across his stiff expression. "It's been catching butterflies," he said, then added after an uncomfortable pause, "You should keep your garage open." That was the first olive branch, or maybe catnip branch, between us. From then on, he stopped calling authorities, though he continued muttering about zoning ordinances. I responded with extra polite greetings and occasional loaves of courtesy banana bread. Gradually, something softened in the rhythm of the neighborhood. People slowed down during walks to peek into the garage, dropping off cat food or old blankets. Even the HOA president admitted, with bureaucratic reluctance, that feral rodent complaints had vanished since the incident. Still, every time I passed Clive's manicured lawn, I felt the story humming unfinished. I didn't yet know that his private reason for irritation wasn't simply fastidiousness, but something far sadder, a discovery that formed the next act of this odd tale, the moment compassion traded claws for forgiveness. 2 weeks after the storm, when the last pile of damp cardboard had been replaced by neat cat beds and a rhythm had settled around fur and feeding times, I realized the situation had evolved from rescue operation to small-scale commune. My garage had a mayor, Biscuit, a council of mothers, Praline and Juniper, and 6 mischievous adolescents who treated shelves as their playground gym. It was functional chaos, the kind where you forget which mug on your counter contains coffee and which contains kibble. I documented it on social media partly to stay sane, partly so friends could help with donations of food and litter. To my surprise, the posts attracted local volunteers, turning my driveway into an unofficial drop-off hub. Only one person still regarded it as a scandalous blight: Clive. Though he'd stopped his open warfare, I could feel his disapproval radiating like low-frequency hum whenever I stepped outside. Then, one overcast afternoon, as I was loading crates for the spay appointments, I saw him standing awkwardly near the mailbox. He wasn't carrying his usual camera phone or clipboard. Instead, he held a small carrier with air holes. "This," he said gruffly, thrusting it toward me, "was under my shed. Inside was a ginger kitten as frail as a whisper. I don't know what to do with it," he added. Complicated thank yous jammed in my throat. "Bring it here," I said finally, lifting the lid so warmth and scent would comfort the tiny newcomer. Clive lingered, eyes darting between the other cats and the old blanket lining the floor. He looked oddly uncertain, the way people do when they approach a memory they'd tried to bury. "You know," he murmured, "my wife used to feed strays. Before she passed. Used to drive me mad, cooked chicken every night for them." I froze, realization sliding sharp and quiet. All his anger, his reports, his rants about scratches, they'd probably been armor against that ghost of a habit, proof he'd survived her absence. I offered soft neutrality. "She sounds kind." He nodded without looking at me. "Kind beyond reason," he said, voice thinning. "After she died, I got rid of the bowls. Thought if I stopped the cats coming, it would hurt less." The confession hovered between us like dust motes caught in light. I suddenly wanted to apologize for every sarcastic comeback I'd thrown his way. Instead, I asked, "Would you help me take this little one to the vet later? Extra hands always help." He hesitated, then nodded once, almost relieved by the invitation. That unexpected partnership turned the page none of the HOA guidelines could have foreseen. Clive showed up that afternoon in a crisp polo shirt, pretending indifference as kittens clambered over his shoes. During the drive to the clinic, he told me fragments about his wife. Her laugh, her habit of naming cats after jazz singers, the way she used to hum while spooning out tuna. When the vet declared the ginger kitten underweight but otherwise healthy, he smiled faintly. "Guess we saved Ella," he said, choosing the name without consulting me. After that day, he came by often, at first under excuses, checking noise levels, ensuring public health compliance. Then gradually just because. The cats started expecting him at dusk. Biscuit would trot out to meet him, tail upright, as if saluting. He claimed he only brushed them to reduce allergies. But once I caught him talking softly to Pip about stock prices, the sight nearly made me choke on my tea. Meanwhile, the local rescue group finally contacted me. They offered to cover ongoing vet costs if I maintained the colony officially. It felt like adopting a municipality, but paperwork was preferable to guilt. I registered the Wisteria Whiskers Colony, complete with a social media page run by my friend Leah. The small fame that followed was equal parts hilarious and humbling. Donations, photo shoots, an article titled "Kindness in the Garage." Someone even sent a painted sign reading "Nora's Cat Embassy." I nailed it above the door, half for irony, half for ownership of my accidental destiny. Through all of it, Clive remained the story's most surprising twist. One evening, as we were cleaning litter boxes side by side, he said, "You know, my HOA report started quite the ripple." I braced for complaint, but he continued, "Since you took them in, my garden hasn't seen a single rat. Turns out balance beats control." Then he laughed, a small rusty sound like old hinges moving for the first time in years. By summer, the garage was cleaner than most people's kitchens. Each cat wore a tiny colored collar marking vaccination status. Neighbors who once frowned now dropped in to help with feedings. Children left painted stones shaped like cats along the walkway. Even the mail carrier set down parcels quietly to avoid disturbing nap times. My chaotic reputation had metamorphosed into benevolent folklore. One Saturday, I caught Clive recording a video of Pepper chasing a laser dot. His voice in the background filled with affectionate commentary. When he noticed me, he blushed crimson. "For my granddaughter," he muttered. "She likes animals." I pretended to believe him. Later that week, he printed photos of the cats and pinned them proudly on the community board under the title "Neighborhood Pest Control Team." No one dared remove them. As autumn edged in, every small gesture stitched the neighborhood together, tails and tempers included. Yet the biggest shift happened on a quiet August evening. when Clive appeared holding a folded piece of paper, an HOA petition proposing an official exemption for managed feral colonies. "It's overdue," he said. "People need rules that make room for kindness." We spent an hour collecting signatures. By nightfall, even the president's dog had licked approval. As autumn edged in, I sometimes thought about that night of heavy rain, how wet whiskers had changed not just my garage, but the emotional plumbing of an entire block. I realized this mission had never really been about rescues. It was about rehabilitation in every direction. The animals, the neighborhood, and one surprisingly tender widower. But the tale wasn't done yet. Stray stories rarely end on tidy notes. They multiply like kittens into new chapters. I didn't know that winter would bring the coldest snap in decades, one that would test every ounce of compassion we'd collectively built, and decide whether our garage goodwill could survive when warmth itself became scarce. By December, our cul-de-sac had grown used to the rhythmic meow choir that greeted sunrise. People waved through frost-fogged car windows. Children dragged parents over after school to deliver tins of food. And Clive, of all people, had become the unofficial minister of treats, arriving with precise rations in labeled containers. Then an early-season blizzard swept in from Canada, faster and angrier than the forecasters had predicted. 1/2 hour turned our mild Connecticut town into a snow globe trapped on high spin. The whirling white erased driveways, swallowed hedges, including Clive's precious roses, and muffled the entire street. I realized how dangerous it could get when my breath fogged inside the garage. The space heater spluttered pathetically against the cold, and the cats, usually a flurry of curiosity, sat huddled into trembling clusters. I called the rescue group, but they were already overwhelmed with emergency cases. Shelters were losing power, so the responsibility was ours. Leaping into action felt natural now, unlike those first panicky months. But this time, I wasn't alone. Clive appeared through the snowstorm, wrapped in an overcoat the color of penguin feathers, holding a toolbox and a portable heater. "If they're freezing, I can fix that," he said simply, brushing snow from his eyelids. Together we improvised, lined the walls with reflective insulation, draped spare curtains across gaps, stacked cardboard like fortress battlements. Leah arrived with bags of straw and old pet carriers borrowed from the clinic. It was chaos, laced with adrenaline and clumps of fur, but by midnight the garage hummed with warmth again. The cats sensed the restoration. Some instinct told them the humans had chosen to stay. One by one they crept toward us, rubbing against our legs, tails like little exclamation points. When electricity finally flickered back in the neighborhood, Clive refused to leave. "I'll keep watch," he declared, setting up a folding chair beside Biscuit's throne treadmill. Around 3 in the morning, wrapped in blankets and the sound of steady feline purrs, he started talking, voice softer than the snow outside. "I hadn't realized how quiet my house was until they started meowing again next door," he said. "It's like they brought her laughter back in small doses." I didn't interrupt. Sometimes grief needs to echo uninterrupted. By dawn, the storm had exhausted itself. Morning light crept through garage windows, revealing a scene equal parts ridiculous and tender. 2 grown adults asleep among a dozen drowsing cats, steam from coffee cups curling above our heads. Outside, the neighborhood sparkled untouched. The crisis had passed, but something irreversible had happened. We weren't just saving animals anymore. We'd built a tiny ecosystem of trust that no quarterly HOA memo could regulate. Over the following weeks, news of the cat shelter that never froze spread. The local newspaper ran a short piece. Clive made the cover photo purely by accident, caught mid-motion, handing a kitten to a volunteer. He pretended to hate the attention, but secretly cut out the article and framed it in his garage. Donations surged again, enough to insulate properly and install heating lamps. Even the HOA president, formerly our nemesis, stopped by with extra tiles and a sheepish grin. Council voted to reimburse electric costs, he admitted. Neighborhood morale is off the charts. Consider this an apology. When spring returned, the garage looked different. Clean, bright, lined with tidy cubbies labeled biscuit, praline, domino, and so on. And one shelf simply marked Ella, Clive's favorite. On weekends, we hosted Reading to Cats events for kids, a fundraising idea that turned into outright delight. Clive read Treasure Island with theatrical gravitas, and the cats curled around his ankles as though auditioning for crew parts. I watched from the doorway, equal parts proud and bemused. The man who once measured grass blades was now a cult hero in fleece slippers. During one of those mellow afternoons, he turned to me suddenly. "You realize," he said, scratching Domino's chin, "we've rewritten this street's entire personality. Used to be a cluster of lonely people hiding behind shrubs." He gestured vaguely toward the neighbors chatting over coffee beside the curb. "And now, everyone waves." He paused, eyes crinkling. "They should make us co-chairpersons of Good Trouble." I grinned. "You'd want to lead a committee again?" He chuckled, eyes glinting. "Only if it has fur." That summer, the colonies stabilized and a comfortable 9 cats. 3 had been adopted by nearby families, including tiny Pip, who went to the postal carrier's grandkids. The garage no longer smelled of panic, but of straw and comfort. I kept the sign Nora's Cat Embassy, though I added another underneath. Founded by Biscuit and Clive, reformed HOA rebel. It made him blush, but he didn't take it down. One evening near midsummer, he invited me for tea in his backyard. The roses had recovered, though a few stems bore suspicious scratch marks. We sat under a purple sky, sipping from mismatched cups, while a few feline ambassadors prowled between flower pots. He looked out over the yard and said, almost to himself, "Funny how noise ends up being what saves you." Then louder to me, "You remember how mad I was about scratches on my car?" I smiled, vividly. He nodded, smiling too. Every mark tells me life was still happening. I needed the reminder. Later, when darkness softened the edges of houses and porch lights flicked on, we heard tiny mews from the hedge. 2 new strays, timid and curious. Without exchanging a word, we both rose, fetched bowls, and set out food. The newcomers hesitated, then approached, tails trembling. Biscuit, old and imperious, stepped forward to inspect, then allowed them a space beside him. Watching that small diplomatic ceremony, Clive whispered, "Round 2, with mock dread and quiet joy." I laughed. "Guess the presidency of Good Trouble isn't a term position." He lifted his mug in a toast. "To every creature we think we're rescuing, and to all the ways they rescue us right back." Now, months later, when people walk past and joke that I run the coziest cat cafe without a license, I smile and think about the night of that storm, the hum of space heaters, and the moment a lonely man handed me a ginger kitten. My garage never went back to normal. It became home, for Claus, for community, and for a lonely heart next door who rediscovered companionship amid paw prints. If you ever wonder whether small kindnesses matter, listen for them in winter. The faint purr behind a closed door where warmth keeps spreading because someone chose not to close it again.